Welcome back, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our headlines. Ukraine has reportedly hit Russia with a drone attack, injuring at least one person after talks between President Trump and President Putin in Alaska on ending the ongoing war. US President Donald Trump said Ukraine should make a deal to end the war because Russia is a very big power. Well, this comes as France, Germany and the UK are set to host a call this afternoon with allies on the ongoing peace efforts over the war in Ukraine, as Germany says the US is ready to join security guarantees. Canada, Turkey, India and South Korea have all responded positively to the talks in Alaska, highlighting this as a moment of momentum. Israeli President Isaac Herzog has made a statement at an Israeli protest, stating the government is going to do everything they can to return the hostages. Demonstrations are taking place across Israel with calls for a hostage deal and an end to the war in Gaza. A planned visit by US trade negotiators to New Delhi later this month has been called off. The delayed talks on a proposed trade agreement dash hopes of relief from additional US tariffs on Indian goods from the 27th of August. Dozens of people have reportedly been injured after a 5.8 magnitude earthquake struck Indonesia, with heavy aftershocks recorded. Rescue efforts are ongoing as 2 people remain in a critical condition. At least 8 people have died and 4 remain missing after flash floods in northern China, according to state media. The country has faced weeks of extreme monsoon rains, with heavier than usual downpours battering its north and south. Well, this comes as at least 344 people have died in northwestern Pakistan after 2 days of heavy rains and flash floods, that according to local officials. The deluge struck with lightning, landslides and cloudbursts in the deadliest downpour of this monsoon season so far, with bodies missing and rescue operations underway. And pro-democracy activists and labour groups hold hundreds of rallies nationwide to oppose the Trump administration's push for Texas to redraw its congressional map. Beto O'Rourke spoke in Texas, where Democrat lawmakers have fled to block a Republican-backed redistricting plan. But we start in the Middle East, as Israel's President Isaac Herzog has urged the world to stop being hypocritical as he joined hostage families at Tel Aviv's Hostage Square. His remarks came after relatives of those held in Gaza called for a nationwide strike to demand their return and a truce deal. Let's listen to his full statement.
Our sons and daughters are there in the dungeons of Gaza for 681 days. We want them back home as soon as possible. The world should want them back home as soon as possible. Stop being a bunch of hypocrites. Press, because when you know how to press, you press.
Well, Herzog declared there is not a single Israeli who does not want the hostages home. We are doing everything to bring you back. He accused the international community of surrendering to Hamas and said the world must want the hostages home immediately. Let's now listen to what some protesters have had to say in Israel.
I think 90% of Israelis, maybe a little bit less, supported the war in the beginning. But I think at this point, people feel that it's time to end it. People feel that it's time to move forward. And there's a very, very strong sentiment that if we don't return the hostages, Israel will never recover, will never be the same.
To continue a war that is a war that you can decide upon, you can either stop it or you can continue it, that's already a big crime. Because we have had many wars, most of them or many of them were not in our hands. We had to fight them. This is a war that we could stop and we should stop. And also we are doing a lot of harm to the Palestinian population, which is not Hamas in Gaza and elsewhere.
I'm here because I can't stand not doing anything when there is hostages in Gaza and they're in a military situation and they need to get out right now, and our government and leadership don't do anything to do it and to seal the deal. So we have to do something and be loud and show that we care and that we want to see them come home.
Well, opposition leader Yair Lapid also threw his support behind the strike, urging Israelis to walk out in solidarity with the families. Lapid said striking was not about politics but about compassion, stressing that their grief had already lasted 681 days. Well, with us to discuss Isaac Herzog's comments, but also these protests, is Professor Kobi Michael, a senior researcher at the INSS and Misgav Institute, joining us live once again from Israel. Professor Kobi Michael, thank you for joining us once again on NewsX World. Let's first look at these comments from Herzog. He's urged the world to stop being hypocritical. What does he mean by that?
I think that he means that the international media, the international community as a whole, okay, there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, they internalize, adapt, and even amplify and echo the Hamas narratives, be it with regard to the starvation or with regard to the fatalities or war crimes and so on and so forth. And instead of pressuring Hamas, which is without any doubt an Islamo-Nazi terror organization that initiated the attack, that the murderous barbaric attack, and in a very deliberate manner actually tortures its own people by refusing to end the war. And although there is a very broad consensus in the international community and among the Arab countries here in the region that Hamas cannot be part of the day after in the Gaza Strip and Hamas must be dismantled, the pressures at the end of the day are directed or addressed to Israel instead of to Hamas. And the international community not only echoes the narrative of Hamas, but pressures Israel to flow the Gaza Strip with humanitarian aid, which most of it is stolen, looted by Hamas in order to feed itself and in order to use it for selling in high prices in the markets to improve its financial situation. So I think that this is the hypocrisy that President Herzog refers to. And I think that what we see today in the streets of Israel is a very unique manifestation of the vital and vibrant democracy that we have in Israel. And at the end of the day, this is a sort of, I would say, a collision or a reflection of a collision between two values systems, and this collision very rapidly becomes to be even a sort of a political collision, because the Israeli public is divided between those who believe that the state of Israel must do anything, everything, and in any price in order to bring back the hostages, under the idea that the main obligation of the state is for its individuals, and the other approach or the other camp believes that the first obligation that the state has, and mainly Israel, who lives in a very hostile and violent neighborhood, is to the collective security, and therefore the national security approach should be much wider than that.
Professor Kobi Michael, we don't have too much longer left, but of course there was an outcry from former heads of the army, Secret Service, intelligence officials who did say that the war in its current format is not going to assist in the release of hostages. People also saying that, of course, on the streets are protesting against any further military action for the risk on hostages, because Hamas, of course, have been treating these hostages horrifically. We've seen the video footage. We know the condition of many of the hostages that are alive. It is a dire one. Is there not a consensus from within Israel and potentially beyond that Netanyahu's method is not working in achieving one of his three key goals? Of course, one of the main goals, which is returning these hostages alive where they are already alive, and if they're dead, returning their bodies.
No, I think that there is no such a consensus among the Israeli constituency. There are voices, and there is a camp, and maybe even a big camp, that thinks that Netanyahu does what he does, or Netanyahu prefers to continue the war due to personal, political, survival interests or considerations. But there is I would say, another big camp that thinks just the opposite of that. There is no doubt that there is a very broad consensus among the Israeli society about the need to eliminate Hamas. The dispute between the camps in Israel is about the priorities.
Okay, Professor Kobi Michael, I'm conscious of time, and I just want to pick up on what you've said. There are two consensuses, one which is dismantling Hamas, one which is the return of these hostages. Which one is more important to Israel?
As to which camp you belong. I think that the camp that supports the release of the hostages as the first priority thinks that this must be the first thing that Israel should do. And the other camp believes that releasing the hostages is something that there will be an outcome of the Israeli victory, the dismantling of Hamas, and the creation of a new security reality in the Gaza Strip.
Yes, Professor Kobi Michael, thank you ever so much for joining us on this discussion. Of course, the topic is divisive, not just within Israel, but also across the world. But humanity, of course, is a key pillar in those discussions that will continue to happen also here on NewsX World. Let's move from one conflict to another and to Europe, where a Ukrainian drone strike injured a railway worker and damaged a power line in Russia's Voronezh region overnight. That according to local governor Alexander Gusev. The track technician was hospitalized and train services were briefly delayed before resuming by Sunday morning. Russia's defense ministry said 9 drones were shot down over Voronezh and claimed a total of 46 Ukrainian drones were destroyed overnight across regions west of Moscow. Kyiv has previously said such strikes are retaliation for Moscow's ongoing bombardment of Ukraine, which is targeting infrastructure that supports Russia's war efforts. The attack comes in the wake of the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska, which ended without progress towards ending the conflict directly, but with discussions set to still carry on. President Trump says that Kyiv should reach a deal with Moscow, remarking that Russia is a very big power, and they're not. Well, joining us to discuss all of these developments, Glenn Grant, an ex-advisor to the Ukrainian Defence Minister, who joins us live from Riga, Latvia. Glenn, as always, a pleasure. A lot for us to get through, so let's jump straight in. Firstly, your opinion on these Ukrainian strikes. Do you share that rhetoric from Ukraine that it is a retaliatory strike, of course, in the wake of Russian strikes going the other way?
No, I don't. It's just that's a silly thing to say. This is a war, and this is just another attempt to actually reduce the Russian attacks in general on Ukraine. Remembering that the fighting on the front line. Don't forget this. The fighting on the front line is going on heavily. And yesterday there were something like 150 attacks in various parts of the line by Russian forces. So everything that Ukraine is doing in the rear area is trying to reduce the effectiveness of the front line. So you could use the word retaliatory, but that's retaliation for the whole last 3.5 years, which makes the word a nonsense.
Yes, and Glenn, let's look at some comments from Donald Trump. He says that Russia is strong and Ukraine is not, and that Ukraine should agree to a deal. Conversation has been raised about the Donetsk region potentially being a point where there could be some compromise. Do you think Zelensky is in a mood to compromise after being excluded from these talks?
No, I don't. But he is between a rock and a hard place. If he wants to keep Trump on side and America on side, he's got to show at least some flexibility. But you know, this is disgusting of Trump. He's taking the Russian side against Ukraine, and his comment that Russia is big and Ukraine is small is actually geographically it's correct, but in terms of this war, it's not as correct as it might look. Because don't forget that Ukraine has already trashed a large part of the Russian Navy, and it's destroying huge amounts of energy facilities in the rear. Russia is actually hurting. And Putin, one of the things that Putin wants from this conference is Trump's support for delay. Because if he gets delay, it gives him time to rebalance things and to continue his attacks on the front line.
Glenn, before we wrap up this discussion, of course, Vladimir Putin and Trump speaking in Alaska. You joined us on the programme live when that was taking place. Another conversation on Monday now between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. Do you think Trump's rhetoric will change once again after that meeting?
Well, I'm hoping that the president of Finland goes to the meeting as well, because he is a friend of Trump. And something that I've just said on BBC, which is that it's only personality that actually sways Trump. He's not swayed by strength of European forces or money or anything else like that, because he doesn't really understand it. So if someone in the room is actually talking sense that Trump believes, then there's a chance that we might actually get a sensible outcome from this. Otherwise, he's just going to bully Zelensky. And by the way, I'm in Kyiv, not in Riga.
Oh, thank you, Glenn, for that update. I really appreciate you joining us. Of course, such a complex discussion to be had with so many different moving parts, discussions ongoing, and so many countries that, of course, are involved. We will now move on to some of those nations as the French presidency says that the leaders of Britain, France and Germany will host a video call on Sunday involving Kyiv's allies in a coalition of the willing meeting to discuss steps towards peace in Ukraine. The meeting, coordinated jointly by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, will come a day before Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky travels to Washington following the US-Russia summit, the Elysee has said on Saturday. Well, Glenn, thank you for staying with us to discuss this. Of course, European support for Ukraine has remained steadfast throughout this conflict. A conversation with European leaders and Zelensky just before this summit. How significant is this coalition of the willing meeting following that summit?
Well, it's important. It probably should have had a meeting before the summit and sent Trump in with some extremely strong and clear lines that Europe will not want crossing, because Europe has become almost secondary to this whole activity. And I think that Trump doesn't actually want them to do anything except provide money. Because otherwise they're a nuisance to him, because they disrupt his thinking and his plans. I hope that out of this there's going to be an extremely strong line from Europe, and that they will not move backwards and start using Weasley words to accept a bad deal for Ukraine and still say yes, but we helped. These are very dangerous times, very dangerous times, and these European leaders need to actually find some extra strength, I think, in the coming weeks.
Glenn, do you think Donald Trump has any inkling in listening to what Europe has to say? He sidelined them from these meetings. He's obviously held private discussions and joint discussions, but not necessarily in person. Will Europe have any sway over Trump?
I said only with personality. So maybe the president of Finland, who he likes because he plays golf, can sway him, and maybe the president of Germany. But I mean, the other leaders, I think he treats them with disdain, to be blunt, and I don't see that that's going to change. So even if the coalition of the willing doesn't actually divvy up and do some action, and not just money and talk, then they're losing credibility with Trump and with his team, which is more important. With people like Hesketh, who says the Europeans aren't doing anything. So we need to change gear in Europe to actually physically do something to help Ukraine, not just talk about it.
Yes, and Glenn, in terms of the action that we have seen from the European Union. Of course, there have been more than a dozen rounds of sanctions placed on Russia that seemingly are having a limited impact. Do you think that could be a precursor for Trump if these talks do break down? And do you expect there to be any US action relating to sanctions on Russia if a deal can't get over the line, which Trump has made clear that he wants to be done as soon as possible?
To be honest, no. I mean, Trump's opportunity for putting sanctions on were the moment that Putin stepped on the plane and left, and that Trump had actually been humiliated. The fact that Trump is just saying, oh, we need to let the peace process go, means that Putin has basically won this round, and Trump is going to continue delaying doing anything as long as he physically can. Because, to be blunt, he's supporting Russia. He's not supporting Ukraine.
Glenn, as always, it is a pleasure to speak with you and get your insights on all of the diplomatic efforts that are going into trying to end this conflict in Ukraine. We will bring you those updates from that coalition of the willing meeting. Let's move on now, but stay in Europe, as the offices of the ruling Serbian Progressive Party have been set on fire during a fifth night of unrest. This comes as people protest the railway station collapse in Novi Sad that took place in November last year, killing 16 people, with many blaming corruption and corner cutting by Vucic's government for the disaster. While the anti-corruption demonstrations have drawn in hundreds of thousands of protesters, they had been largely peaceful until Wednesday's clash, when pro-government loyalists staged counter-demonstrations. Riot police have been deployed in a number of cities, including Belgrade, where the people are taking part in demonstrations to demand early elections. Protesters also smashed the windows of the headquarters of the Serbian Radical Party, a coalition partner of the SNS. Vucic responded to Saturday's developments on Instagram, writing that violence is an expression of total weakness, and he promised to punish the bullies. Well, joining us to discuss the scenes that you're seeing on my screen and all of the points and ramifications that have got us here is Asuma Kotoka, anchor and correspondent who joins us live from the NewsX World newsroom. Asuma, of course, the visuals that we are showing, alarming. Clearly there is anger there, violence and items getting destroyed, buildings being smashed. What more can you tell us about how we got here?
The history behind this is that last month in November, a city in Serbia called Novi Sad. So in this city, a bridge collapsed and 16 people were killed in this bridge collapse. And then people got upset about this, that they started demanding justice for the people who were killed, and they demanded that there was corruption and corner cutting in this current government who's been ruling Serbia for over a decade now. Exactly, to be exact, they have been ruling, they have been in the same party has been in power, known as SNS, for 12 years now. And they are right-wing, pro-Russian government, and also seeing these protests, Russia has said that they are ready to help their brother nation, indicating that Serbia as their brother also. We haven't seen what else Russia will do to help with these protests, but so far Russia has issued this statement that they will help this brotherly nation. However, yes, protests have erupted, and they were, before these protests became aggressive like this, as we are showing in the screen, they were calm. They were not violent like this. It just started happening. It just started becoming violent 5 days ago when the counter pro SNS party supporters started demonstrating against the peaceful demonstrations that were ongoing. And these protests are weekly held for at least a year now, and it's still ongoing, but this is the first time that became very aggressive. And you have seen the attacks that happened in the headquarters of current ruling party SNS, and also they targeted the headquarters of coalition party as well. So this was not the only office that was attacked during this demonstrations that's going on and the other coalition parties' headquarters has also been affected by these protests. However, we have reports of brutality used by the police of Serbia to contain these
yes,
protesters.
Asuma, unfortunately we are short on time, but thank you ever so much for providing that insight. Police brutality is not something that has yet been confirmed. Any confirmation of that or any further reports we will bring to you, and any further unrest that is seen in Serbia in the coming hours and days. But we do move on now, and a magnitude 5.8 earthquake has hit central Sulawesi, Indonesia today. The earthquake has reportedly injured dozens of people. The quake at a depth of 10 kilometres shook Poso Regency and was felt in surrounding areas. There are no reports of immediate fatalities so far. Indonesia's location on the Pacific Ring of Fire makes it highly prone to seismic activity due to tectonic plate movements. More than 600 people were killed in one of the most destructive earthquakes in Indonesia in 2022 after a shallow 5.6 magnitude earthquake struck Cianjur town in West Java. More than 7,729 people were injured and many remain missing to date, with more than 62,500 homes damaged across 16 districts in Cianjur Regency and the surrounding areas. We will continue to monitor, of course, these rescue efforts after this earthquake of a 5.8 magnitude. But that is all we have time for now. We'll be back shortly with more of the latest from across the world. Thank you.